Hello everyone. In 2021, the American biotechnology company Oxitec released 144,000 genetically modified mosquitoes into the Florida Keys, an archipelago in the US. These mosquitoes were deployed through boxes containing eggs, which were placed at 6 different sites. Once the eggs hatched, it was planned that approximately 12,000 male mosquitoes would emerge each week for 12 weeks, reaching a total of 144,000. This number increased to 5 million in 2022 and 3 million in 2023. Oxitec boxes were placed on volunteers' private properties where water was added to enable mosquito breeding. The final stage of this mosquito release was completed in November 2023. But why were these genetically modified mosquitoes released, and what was the purpose? The project faced resistance from the local population ever since its announcement in 2011. People were concerned about the potential effects of these genetically modified organisms, which were nicknamed superbugs, or Robo-Frankenstein mosquitoes. Rumors about mutant mosquitoes spread quickly, and over 100,000 people signed a petition on change.org opposing the project. By 2016, this number had reached 160,000, and by 2023, it exceeded 238,000. Media reports highlighted the reactions of angry residents who refused to be test subjects. Campaigns were launched to stop the experiments, with people's primary concerns being that they were used as test subjects without their consent, and that it would be impossible to recall the released mosquitoes. Despite all the protests, federal regulators approved the project. Why was this project so important? The target mosquito species was the Aedes aegypti, also known as the yellow fever mosquito. This species spreads serious diseases such as dengue fever, Zika virus, and yellow fever, and inhabits areas where nearly half the world's population lives. Despite decades of effort, there is still no effective treatment or specific cure for these diseases. As an invasive species, the yellow fever mosquito spreads rapidly, taking over regions. Currently, it can be found in tropical, subtropical, and temperate regions worldwide. To combat the Aedes aegypti, people often use chemical insecticides. However, while effective, these methods have not stopped the spread of diseases. Each year, 100 to 400 million people are infected with dengue fever. This means the mosquitoes actively released in America are extremely dangerous and genetically modified, no less. The company behind this project, Oxitec, was founded in 2002 by professors from Oxford University and is now owned by the global biotechnology giant Intrexon. Oxitec specializes in producing genetically modified mosquitoes. So how does this process work? Female mosquitoes lay their eggs in specialized rooms called egg production colonies. Each cage contains approximately 12,000 female mosquitoes. After the females lay their eggs, scientists collect them and arrange them in rows for research. Each mosquito egg is as small as a grain of fine salt, making the rows incredibly tiny. Using microscopic needles, researchers inject a drop of patented synthetic DNA into each egg. After this meticulous process, Oxitec technicians monitor the larvae hatching process for 4 days. At this stage, female and male mosquitoes are separated manually. Scientists determine the sexes based on their sizes, as females are always larger than males. According to the company's statement, larvae that survive after injection undergo a series of tests to ensure that the genetic modification was successful. As a result of this process, genetically modified Aedes aegypti mosquitoes named OX534 are produced. These mosquitoes are designed to be exclusively male and non-biting, thanks to a self-limiting gene. Female mosquitoes carrying this gene cannot survive. In 2021, scientists placed genetically modified mosquito eggs on various private properties around the Florida Keys. Since the adult genetically modified mosquitoes look almost identical to their wild counterparts, it is impossible to distinguish them with the naked eye. The goal of the scientists was to mate the genetically modified mosquitoes with wild ones to spread the self-limiting gene within the population. This gene ensures that only male offspring survive. Thus, each genetically modified male mosquito that successfully mates can potentially suppress the population for several generations. A genetically modified mosquito can be thought of as a mutated version of a sterilized insect. Traditionally, other sterile insects are created by exposing males to gamma radiation before releasing them into the wild. However, in this study, a lethal gene synthesized from E. coli and herpes simplex virus is used. This gene produces a protein called TTAV, which interferes with cell activity and causes the infected mosquito to die before reaching maturity. But if a mosquito is infected with a lethal gene, how does it grow and mate with wild females? Scientists provided a temporary antidote to the genetically modified mosquitoes during their development. These modified mosquitoes can only survive the larval stage through special intervention. Otherwise, they die. As a result, a single generation reaches adulthood, mates, and passes on the gene. However, since the antidote is unavailable in the wild, the offspring die before maturing. In addition to the self-limiting gene, researchers also introduced another synthetic gene created from coral DNA. This gene adds a red marker to the mosquito, making it easier for researchers to track the mutated mosquitoes. In summary, the goal is to control the mosquito population and, in turn, public health risks. The Aedes aegypti species accounts for only 4% of the mosquito population in Florida, yet this 4% is responsible for 100% of mosquito-borne diseases in the region. Since other methods have proven ineffective, genetic modification is considered the most viable option. Eliminating mosquitoes entirely is not possible, as they can even develop immunity to toxins. This leaves genetic engineering as the only remaining solution, and it seems to be working. The genetically modified male mosquitoes successfully mated with wild females, which then laid eggs. Scientists collected these eggs, analyzed them in the lab, and confirmed that the lethal gene was effective. An analysis of more than 22,000 eggs showed that only male mosquitoes survived to adulthood. The effect of the gene that kills female offspring lasted for only 2 to 3 months, which is enough for 3 generations of mosquitoes. The mosquitoes carrying the lethal gene were found within a radius of just 400 meters from where they were released. Scientists said this was an expected result and confirmed the self-limiting nature of the genes. In other words, these genes will not persist in the environment for long, and yellow fever mosquitoes as a species will not be completely eradicated. But why was the test conducted in Florida? Recently, cases of locally transmitted dengue fever and Zika virus have been reported in the Florida Keys. Dengue outbreaks in 2009 and 2010 forced local authorities to seek new methods to combat mosquitoes. Efforts to control Aedes aegypti mosquitoes using larvicides and insecticides proved ineffective. Spraying from airplanes, trucks, and even backpacks was attempted, along with the use of mosquito-eating fish, but none of these methods worked. The Mosquito Control Board in the Florida Keys allocates more than $1 million annually, 1/10 of its total budget, for mosquito control, meaning $1 million is essentially wasted. People in Florida are accustomed to pesticides sprayed from planes or trucks. Party hosts hand out insect repellents, and having screened porches is a necessity. A recent survey revealed that 78% of people in the U.S. would support the use of genetically modified mosquitoes if they helped prevent the spread of dangerous diseases. This indicates that those who oppose the plan and sign petitions are in the minority. The company markets its mosquitoes as completely safe. They don't bite, don't spread diseases, their population is kept under control, and they are all male. Oxitec claims its technology is safe for humans, animals, and the environment, and targets only disease-carrying species. If the company's claims are true, these mosquitoes are entirely harmless. Male mosquitoes do not bite humans. They only require nectar for sustenance. Since their offspring cannot reach maturity, a genetically modified mosquito cannot bite a human and transmit anything. Only female mosquitoes bite because they need blood to mature their eggs, and thus only females spread diseases. Males, on the other hand, fly from flower to flower. But can we fully claim that all of this is completely safe? When looking at publicly available information, it becomes evident that this data has been provided by the company itself. Doesn't the company need to profit from its genetically modified mosquitoes? Yes. And this raises some doubts. So what happens if a person is bitten by a genetically modified female mosquito carrying the altered gene? Oxitec claims that very few females are released in their program. Even in such a case, according to Oxitec scientists, nothing would happen. What happens to the environment after these genetically modified mosquitoes are released? Oxitec scientists claim that nothing will happen and evaluate the risk of transmission as very low. Even if we trust the scientists, there are some issues with the genetically modified mosquito plan. The company's primary goal is to reduce overall mosquito populations to slow the spread of diseases. However, achieving this result in the Americas could be difficult, as there aren't many mosquito-borne disease outbreaks to reliably study. Outbreaks can still occur even when mosquito numbers are low. Additionally, some scientists not affiliated with the company worry that releasing genetically modified mosquitoes into residential areas could lead to the emergence of hybrids. These hybrids could pose serious threats to humans and might even become more resistant. In fact, a study suggests that something similar may already have occurred, although the results are currently inconclusive. There's another risk as well. The lethal gene's antidote is an antibiotic used by farmers in agriculture and livestock. Thus, releasing mosquitoes near farming areas areas is risky. Otherwise, there is a possibility that the offspring might survive and give rise to even more dangerous mosquitoes. Despite these concerns, the company plans to release genetically modified mosquitoes at a test site in California. This solution has been approved by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, for pilot programs in Florida, Texas, and California. Currently, due to bureaucratic delays in California, the company has focused its efforts on Florida. Those opposing the program in California primarily argue that there is no evidence that Aedes aegypti mosquitoes are spreading diseases in the state. However, the company did not choose this state randomly. Dangerous mosquitoes were discovered in California about a decade ago and have since rapidly spread across the state. If you think all these experiments are only being conducted in the US, you'd be mistaken. Over 1 billion mosquitoes have been released worldwide by Oxitec. The company has tested its genetically modified mosquitoes in Brazil, Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Malaysia to combat dengue fever. There is also a malaria control program targeting 2 species of malaria-spreading mosquitoes, Anopheles stephensi from India and Anopheles albuminus from Central and South America. Both species are resistant to insecticides and frequently bite humans. In Central America alone, approximately 50 million people live in malaria risk zone. There are also places like East Africa where the disease urgently needs to be stopped. Genetically modified mosquitoes are successfully fulfilling this task. For example, in 2010, genetically modified mosquitoes were released in the Cayman Islands. While this was a relatively small release, it resulted in an 80% reduction in the population of disease-carrying mosquitoes. Of course, this data is provided by Oxitec. For decades, humans have fought against mosquitoes, using every method imaginable to eliminate them. When old methods fail, new ones are developed. Have you ever thought about getting rid of mosquitoes forever? After all, there are plenty of insects on the planet, and humanity seems to have a personal vendetta against mosquitoes. Scientists have also considered the idea of eradicating mosquitoes, but the global consequences of such a mosquito genocide are hard to predict. There are 3,500 species of mosquitoes in the world, but only about 100 of them transmit diseases to humans. We don't have enough information about how the absence of these 100 mosquito species would affect ecosystems. Mosquitoes are part of the food chain, serving as a primary food source for bats, birds, frogs, fish, and other animals. Eliminating 100 mosquito species would undoubtedly have some ecological consequences. For example, dragonflies can eat up to 100 mosquitoes per day. If mosquitoes were eradicated, dragonflies would need to adjust their feeding habits. Since mosquitoes are abundant and easy to hunt, many animals depend on them as a readily available food source. If mosquitoes disappeared, these animals might struggle to survive. Imagine if all the rice in the world disappeared. Although most people don't eat only rice, its sudden absence would reduce the global food supply, potentially leading to hunger. Some scientists believe that eradicating all mosquitoes wouldn't have a significant negative impact on the environment overall. However, it's impossible to predict this with certainty or conduct such experiments on a global scale. Moreover, eradicating mosquitoes could lead to unexpected outcomes. Nature tends to fill voids, and the absence of mosquitoes could create a gap in the blood-sucking insect niche, paving the way for the emergence of new, potentially more dangerous species. Who knows what nature might bring? In short, large-scale human interventions, such as eliminating a species, often have negative consequences. For this reason, genetic modification is considered a safer option. However, it's difficult to draw definitive conclusions about the long-term effects of genetic modification, as it's impossible to fully predict how nature will respond to such interventions. Although genetic modification seems like a safer option, it too could lead to unexpected consequences for the balance of nature. So, do you think genetic modification could be a viable solution in the fight against mosquitoes, or should we let nature take its course? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. See you in a new video soon.